Welcome to the Shield Your Business from Chaos podcast, where there's no building, no people, no third-party suppliers, and no systems all combined to create Chaos the Dragon, which is battled by King Phoenix and his shield.
Okay, after you collected all your information from your external parties, the next phase is interviewing and collecting information from your internal subject matter experts. And I think this is probably one of the most critical aspects of having a successful BCP audit. Okay, and what you're going to do here is you're going to interview your departmental heads and maybe some of the executives in your company, understand what they see as risk, and start drilling down with them, like, and ask questions like, what happens if X, Y, and Z are not available? What is its impact to you? And what I've found interesting is when you talk to certain departmental heads, they'll quickly identify areas that are important to them and maybe some areas that are not necessarily important to them. But when you talk to a different departmental head, you get the opposite, right? What may be viewed as not important to one group is highly important to the other group. And it's important that that knowledge goes from one leader to the other, right? And one way to shake out the risk, if you will, for the organization is to modify your audit program to do a study of that information between departments. Roswitha, does that kind of make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Okay. So once you've collected that information, you'll quickly figure out what business processes are critical to the organization as a whole. Again, it may not be critical to one department, but it may be critical to the organization. So you'll start to incorporate that into your audit program. We talked a little bit about engaging third party, internal, and never forget to be sure in your audit program to incorporate any legal or regulatory requirements. Okay, you want to make sure those are in there. And then if your company has adopted some type of framework, you want to audit against their framework too. So you want to be knowledge of, hopefully they do have a framework. If they don't, then that's an audit issue in itself.
Yes, it really is.
Okay, so we are now at the let's prepare your audit program. You collected all the information, okay, and you're ready to build out tasks that you want your audit team to execute, okay? And again, there's a right way, a wrong way. This is David's way. I always break it down into 4 chunks, okay? And the top chunk is probably your most beefiest area. I call it BCP 101, right? This is where you find most of your scripted, already well-known audit agenda type things for BCP. And that includes things like, review the policies, the procedures, standards, or guidelines, ensure that there are exercises or drills being performed, ensure that as those drills are performed, is somebody keeping notes of lessons learned, who's tracking remediation of that. Again, going back to the tone at the top, is the drill output communicated to leadership, right? If there's gaps in the identified the drill, you surely don't want to keep that risk information to yourselves, right? Communicated upwards, make sure it gets addressed accordingly. Other things, program governance, roles and responsibilities clearly defined that for the business continuity program. You can start seeking out or set expectations that certain pieces of evidence should be in existence, right? So put that into your audit program. Another basic thing is training, right? And it comes in two aspects: is the business continuity leadership team, are they well versed? Are they qualified for managing a business continuity program? And conversely, how is your business continuity program, how is it being conveyed to the workforce so they know how to comply with the business continuity program?
I'm glad you mentioned the quality of supporting evidence. Something that came to mind when reading that list is that an audit with a green auditor who's not that familiar,
Mhm.
you run the risk of really sort of having these like check the box audits
Mhm.
that don't really get into the meat of things that you might want help remediating, which
That's
is
right.
one of the great things that audit can do for you. And so that quality of supporting evidence, if your auditor is not expecting enough,
Mhm.
this is where I found it helpful to sort of educate the auditor on this is what we should really be seeing
Yeah.
versus this is what we have.
Yeah.
So if you're a practitioner that already has some experience to kind of, you're not just starting this off and this is your first time doing all of this and everything's overwhelming. But if you have a little bit of seasoning in doing this, where you're able to educate an auditor who either is still very new in general or very new to BCP, you can really get some help there by saying, hey, like I've got concerns because this department doesn't seem to have a lot of meat on the bones of the evidence that we're getting. And versus this other department, maybe they have you can kind of educate the auditor to say here, like, this is the good stuff that I see. This is where I think we need help, and get them to drive that conversation. And then that way you're not always the bad guy.
Yeah. That's a very good point, Roswitha. I couldn't agree with you anymore.
I'm laughing and nodding because like I know we've both experienced this in different places that we've worked, and it's so common throughout business continuity and throughout the challenges that we can face with audits.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this I'm just going to add on top of that, if that's okay with you, Roswitha.
Sure.
When it comes to evidence, well, as part of the pre-audit planning, and we're just now initiating the audit, we should have received at this point in the phase of the audit, we should, through an internal control questionnaire, we probably should have at this point already requested copies of your BIAs or your policies and your procedures and your standards and your guidelines. She already have that. And another expectation of the pre-audit planning is have the audit team review the procedures. Hey, do they make sense? Do the procedures make sense? Are they evergreen? In other words, every business changes, right? And are the policy, procedures, and standards, are they changing accordingly, right? I call it,
Yeah.
are they evergreen, right? Are they being maintained? And then I would challenge my audit team to dissect the procedure specifically. And everywhere it says, we will do X, Y, and Z on an annual basis, a quarterly basis, monthly basis, or what have you, then I would put it in the audit program to validate that that is being done.
Yeah.
And then is it accurate and complete? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's I want to say that's a big chunk of the audit. I call that 101 stuff, right? You start getting to the higher level stuff where you start really honing in on the risk that we identified in the previous section, right? These are risks that new and evolving risk, and we're doing an analysis of how that impacts the organization. Okay, we're going to start testing those risks, and what I generally do is oscillate a few of those risks based on priority, based on availability and subject matter expertise within my audit team, right? And I'll focus on a few risks that are departmental related, okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do a few of those. Then I'll do a few risks that are multi-departmental. In other words, business processes that go from one function to another. Remember how I was telling you earlier about one department may not see this as a big deal, but another one does, right? This is where we flush out some of that stuff, right?
So for clarity, I've got a question here to make sure that our audience understands kind of how you would use this. Are you saying that like your 201 and 301, that these are the things that you sort of tackle as like spot audits annually after you've kind of done your first initial audit, or are these things that you would expect to see in a first audit also?
This, yeah, that's a good question, Roswitha. I probably should have clarified that up
No,
front.
it's all good.
The 201 and the 301 and the 401, I kind of view that as being lumped into your big audit.
Okay, so the every 3 to 5 year
Yeah.
cycle, you would make
Yeah.
sure that you had different risks at each level. And then if needed, I guess, then also sort of as part of your spot audits annually. But basically you're looking at this is what you would do for your big every 3 to 5 year audit. Okay, thanks for clarifying.
That's correct.
Okay.
I didn't mention this earlier, but you know, we as an audit team would do our due diligence and interview third party and internal people, right? But as part of this audit program, you know, that's us doing the risk assessment. As part of the audit expectation, I would expect the business continuity management team for the organization to constantly do, not constantly, but be mindful of new risk and not, if me as an auditor present, here's some risks that we think are may impact your organization, and it's not on your radar, then that's an issue. Right?
That's a problem. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, right. So again, 201, I cherry pick a few that are departmental related. 301, I cherry pick a few high risk areas that are cross-functional. And again, if we have audit findings, cross-functional risk, odds are we're going to, you know, the other risks that are cross-functional will probably are in jeopardy too, right?
Okay, yeah.
So you want to communicate that out. And the last one is a bucket that I would create, and that's the what are the really big dogs that not only impact a department or a cross organization, but which one of the, you know, what are we going to do about these risks that could impact the organization as a whole, either financially or impact their reputation.
Right.
Make sense?
Okay. Yes, it does. Very thorough.
Okay. So if it's okay with you, Roswitha, I'll move on to the next phase, post audit. Okay. All right. So to bring all this together, we would eventually produce an audit report that really some people like, because that means, hey, they identified risk and we're going to potentially get funding and address these risks, and we're going to put our company in a better position to be able to respond to certain things. Okay. Other people will kind of view this as, oh my gosh, I got so much more work to do. But so you can look at it both ways. But when I prepare an audit report, the first things I do is define and convey how I scope the audit. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a right way and a wrong way. This is my way. I convey what was tested and not tested. So it gives the end user the ability to say, hey, they looked at this, but we might have risk over here because they didn't look at it, right? So I clearly define that out. And in some cases, we may randomly or subjectively sample certain things. Well, it's important as an auditor that we disclose our rationale for sampling. Okay, so we disclose that. When I prepare reports in the past, I avoid making any statements that are my opinion. Okay, I try to be as non-subjective as possible, and I let the facts speak for themselves. You'll find it in a lot of my reports where applicable, I'll reference industry best practices. This, you know, I'll get a study from somewhere and say, this is what our competitors are doing, or this is how other companies are mitigating this risk, and this is how we're not meeting those objectives. Okay. I try to compare us to other organizations.
Mhm.
I try to quantify the risk in the report, right? If we fail to do X, Y, and Z, it could result in a financial impact of $0 up to this amount.
Mhm.
By the way, in the news, you probably read that this company had we'll say, ransomware that they didn't have. They didn't have a business continuity program in place, and their business processes couldn't be executed. And this is what the real financial impact was for them. So I try to give the end user some quantifiable data to work with, to understand that this is not my opinion. This is based on facts, and this is what other organizations have been targeted with. All right. And the last thing I try to do is gauge the maturity level of the program in itself. So if I'm looking at maybe a subcomponent, I'll try to provide, here's where we are in the maturity level. And based on whatever framework you adopted, that could change, right? But fundamentally, what's listed on the screen is what I've typically have gauged in the past. And in some cases, you might find that your organization leaders will say, you know what, I'm fine being at a level 3 or a level 4 and not necessarily a 5. As an auditor, I want them to be 5, right? I don't want any risk, but understand that there's a cost associated with that. And as long as the organization makes a effort to define what their risk tolerance is, and being a 3.5 or 4 is perfectly fine.
Yeah. We don't always like that answer, but it is a perfectly appropriate answer because we're not the ones with the purse strings.
That's right.
Thank goodness. Good. Yeah, no, the maturity level, that particular one, I really like. Some of the other ones that you see are sort of a 1 to 4 level. And I don't know that those always are enough. If a 1 to 4 level is all your company needs, then fine, use that. But I like this one personally because I feel like it is a little bit more nuanced than what you typically see in maturity models.
Yep.
Good. Great. Thank you. Is this your last slide before we move on? I just want to make sure. I didn't think you had another one, but I don't want to cut you off if you've got more that you'd like to share with us today, because this has been, I think, very useful and very interesting.
Well, first of all, thank you, Roswitha. I kept this presentation at extremely high level. I appreciate your patience with that. That was the last slide that I prepared.
Okay, sorry about that. No, this is good, actually. And I think this is useful not only for somebody coming in and dealing with this for the first time, but also for somebody who has, let's say that they're at a 2, whether that's in their program or in their auditing, either way. This really gives, I think, some good guidance on how can I improve either to audit or to prepare for an audit. I think this is really helpful on both sides of that coin, and definitely helpful for people well beyond just simply like, this is my first time doing this. I think this is a really good kind of roadmap for people. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. On the topic of sharing, I just want to be clear that our audience can go ahead and use this information that you've shared with us today, and we're really grateful for that.
You're quite welcome, Roswitha.
Yeah, I think you've saved a lot of people quite a bit of time here. David, thank you again for joining us today. I've enjoyed having you as our guest. I think our audience will find this a really good episode, and you're welcome back as a guest anytime if I can twist your arm to do so.
I certainly appreciate it, Roswitha. It's always great talking to you.
It's good. Thanks again to Kingsbridge BCP for sponsoring this podcast. If you're not already following us, you can find the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.